Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Harvey Mudd College online information session. My name is Natalia Duran. I'm going to be leading your session today. We are going to go ahead and go through for the next about 45-ish minutes and learn a little bit more about Harvey Mudd, the Claremont colleges, our admission policies and practices, as well as a little bit of information about financial aid. So before we get started, I want to go ahead and make sure that we learn a little bit more about the Claremont colleges. So for those that are not familiar with our system, the Claremont colleges is a very unique and actually the only type of consortium in existence that was built in this very specific manner. So to give you a little bit of context, in Claremont, we are located about 35 miles east of downtown LA. So we're in the suburbs. We are not in downtown or I guess more of an urban landscape, I should say. We actually have 5 different schools here, which are oftentimes referred to as the 5 C's, the Claremont Consortium, the Claremont Colleges. It all means the same thing. We talk about the 5 undergraduate colleges, but there are technically 7 schools in Claremont. So you'll also see Claremont Graduate University and Keck Graduate Institute, which are not on this map, but they are affiliated with the Claremont colleges. The 5 schools that aren't on your map are all undergraduate exclusive institutions, meaning that they only offer Bachelor's of Arts or Bachelor's of Science, depending on the institution. So on your screen, you'll notice that there are 5 different institutions. We all have 5 different admission offices, 5 different graduation requirements, 5 different ways of studying. So every single school caters to a different population, and that population and the types of majors, the types of students that they recruit, actually has a very interesting backstory. Every single one of our schools was built to fulfill a different need in Claremont, but also built to really reflect a different decade and a different time. So to give you a very brief history lesson, the oldest of the Claremont colleges is actually Pomona College. Pomona was built back in the 1880s with the idea of bringing the East Coast liberal arts style school here to the West Coast. They were a little bit of a test subject, bringing a liberal arts college here to the suburbs of Southern California, where there at the time was mostly kind of orange groves, orchards, agricultural fields, if you will, out here in Southern California. And so they were on their own for about 20-ish years before the idea of the consortium even came to be. And President Blaisdell, who was the president of Pomona back in the day, was the first to really kind of come up with the idea of building a consortium here of 10 schools in Claremont for the upcoming decade, because they were at the turn of the 1900s, or I should say turn of the next upcoming century, my apologies. So for at the turn of the 1900s, he wanted one school for every single decade of the 1900s. And he modeled this system after the Oxford-Cambridge model. So his initial idea was, let's see if we can get 10 schools with 10 different types of history that are happening over the decades. So with that being said, you can do the math yourself. That obviously did not work out. We did not end up having 10 schools in Claremont. Instead, we had 5 very distinct types of undergraduate institutions here, all with a link to the history of the decade that they're originally built in. So to go in founding order, as I mentioned, Pomona is our oldest. After them came Scripps. Scripps is a women's college that was built as a reflection of the 1920s women's suffrage movement. So they just celebrated about 100 years in existence, and really kind of catered to the movement at the time and have allowed for that type of education to persist here in Claremont. So they remain a women's college here amongst 4 other co-ed institutions. After Scripps, we had a little bit of a lull in the decade because you had the Great Depression in the 1930s, and we headed over into the 1940s. At the tail end of World War II, you actually saw the creation of what at the time was known as Claremont Men's College. We all now know it as Claremont McKenna, but originally started off as a men's college for everyone coming back from World War II with the newly created GI Bill. Get an education and something that was possibly going to kickstart the U.S. economy, maybe have a little bit of a political twist to it, or maybe have a little bit more of an economics international relations twist. Really just depended, but the institution obviously went co-ed at some point, and that was during the 1970s when they had a name change to Claremont McKenna instead of Claremont Men's College. With that being said, every single school has really expanded past their original offerings, past their original purpose, but you do see those remnants of the specific institutions and the specific decades in the way the institution still functions, as well as their mission statements and sometimes their graduation requirements. So now we've gone through 1800s, 1920s, 1940s, you head over to the 1950s, which is the institution that's here presenting today. So Harvey Mudd College was very much is is a reflection of the 1950s. So when you think about the 1950s in the United States, most people think of the Cold War, space race, maybe Sputnik. With that being said, the 1950s is really a big portion of why Harvey Mudd is a STEM-based liberal arts institution. So if you ever get a chance to come to campus, and even some of the pictures that you'll see throughout today's presentation, you'll notice that we have a very specific type of architecture. We lovingly call it industrial chic on our campus. It's very much reminiscent of the 1950s architecture style. So it's definitely what you'll see on our campus. The last and remaining school that you're seeing on your screen is Pitzer. Pitzer is a reflection of the 1960s. So it's the last of the undergraduate schools. When folks think about the US in the 1960s, it's oftentimes the civil rights movement. If you're from California, you might think of the farm worker movement. You might think of the environmental movement, the LGBTQ movement. There are a ton of different things that came up in terms of civil disobedience and just also, having a little bit more of a voice in the 1960s. And so for that reason, Pitzer actually functions on what's known as 5 core values. So every single school has different graduation requirements amongst the 5 Claremont colleges. Every school offers different types of majors. Some of us offer overlapping majors, but the benefits of the Claremont Consortium is that our students, if you attend one, you get to attend classes at any of the Claremont colleges. So Harvey Mudd students are consistently on Claremont McKenna's campus. Pomona students are at Pitzer. Scripps is over at Claremont McKenna. We're all kind of mixed and matched. So that's the purpose of it. And we are all located in 1 square mile. So the map that you're seeing from the very top of Harvey Mudd's campus to the bottom of Pomona's campus, depending on how fast you walk, that could take you 15, maybe 20 minutes if you're truly strolling through. But 5 undergraduate colleges. We offer about 2,500 courses per semester. So that means you have pretty much anything at your fingertips to choose from. It's going to truly be up to you to decide what that's going to look like. But again, it's kind of the best of both worlds. It allows you all the intimacy in the classroom setting of a small private liberal arts education. But when you actually look and step outside of the classroom for things like sporting events or anything that might, whether it's at the dining hall, you're actually going to run into something that feels a little bit more like a medium-sized institution. You end up having closer to 6,000 undergraduates in 1 square mile. There's now an endless supply of new people to meet at any given time, and so it really allows our students the opportunity to interact with folks from different campuses that have different thought processes, that have different graduation requirements, and really going through this in a different way and a different manner. On the right of your screen, you're seeing all the different shared resources. So because we share not just amongst the 5 undergraduates, but also with 2 other graduate institutions, we all funnel funding and resources or funding for certain resources. So you can see some of them are library, which is actually kind of in this blank area over here between Scripps, Claremont McKenna, and Pomona. That's actually where you're going to see our library. It's our 4-story, 2 million book library. It's the 5th largest in all of California. So you have that opportunity to really kind of focus in whether you want to be on the small individual libraries that are in the different campuses or the larger area to study, which is actually where the photo that you're looking at on this slide it was taken as well. So just a couple of different things. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the other ways that the Claremont colleges interact throughout the presentation, but we wanted to start off and give you a little bit of context that the Claremont colleges interact and were intentionally built to interact. So there's a big portion of it. Now, with that being said, let's talk a little bit more about Mudd specifically. So for yourself, you can go ahead and read our mission statement, but the biggest thing to know is that 1950s really kind of mindset definitely plays a role into our mission statement. So we were built to educate scientists, engineers, and mathematicians, but because we were a liberal arts college founded in a consortium of other liberal arts colleges, we're looking for students who aren't just interested in STEM, but rather interested also in the humanities, the social sciences, and the arts. Students who understand the intersection amongst these different areas, and realistically that science and STEM in general doesn't exist in a vacuum. It coexists with all these different fields on a constant and daily basis, and that is a big portion as to who Mudd is. Now you also notice the very clearly bolded and underlined section of that, and that is that our students look to find a clear understanding of the impact of their work on society. This is a big portion of what Mudd does. Our students are consistently consistently looking to see how their work is not just going to impact their time here at Mudd, but actually further past, because a lot of our work here at Mudd, whether it's a clinic or whether it's a research project, will continue on after their graduation. And so this is a big portion of what Mudd does. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. On the left side of your screen, you're seeing a map of California. So if you are not from the state of California and wondering what I mean when I say we're 35 miles east of downtown LA, this is to give you an idea of where we're at. So we are pretty much situated about 10-15 minutes from the mountains over here. So you actually have the foothills right here in Claremont where you can go hiking. We're about an hour away from the beach, about 45 minutes away from Disneyland, and an hour and a half more or less from the desert, depending on which desert you're trying to get to. So Claremont is situated in the suburbs. We're not in downtown LA, but there is actually a train station right here in downtown Claremont that allows our students the flexibility to get in and out of the city should they ever want to. So those are a couple of big things. Now, as far as some of the key figures that you're seeing on your screen, a couple of things to know is that Mudd is actually the smallest in terms of enrollment out of all the Claremont colleges. So 921 is our total enrollment here at Harvey Mudd. And we like to keep things pretty small. When folks think about a STEM education, they're oftentimes thinking really large lecture halls where you're not getting a chance to interact with your professor, you're not getting a chance to actually get hands-on time in the lab, and that's really not what Mudd is about. The idea is that Mudders have the opportunity to have guaranteed research, to be able to work with their professors, to get to know different faculty, and to get to know one another. That is a really big portion of Mudd's mission, is that our students understand that collaboration, amongst each other. And so enrollment, we like to keep things small here at Mudd, and it's intentional. So those are a couple of different things. You'll also notice that 51% female, so Mudd has actually been 50-50 for quite some time now at this point. And so technically we're now majoritively female on our campus, so that is just one of the many perks and one of the, honestly, irregularities that you don't really see in STEM. So it allows our students to have a little bit of a different outlook during their time here in their educational progression at Mudd. You'll also notice that about 60% of your classes have less than 20 students in them here at Mudd. So I will talk about one class that is actually our largest class here on Mudd's campus in just a few slides. But the majority of your classes have very few students in them. So it's going to depend on what campus you're taking your classes at, obviously. But for the most part, 60% of your classes, less than 20 students in it here at Mudd. You'll also notice our 8-to-1 student to faculty ratio and a couple of other just numbers about first-gen students, Pell eligible students, so students who come from low socioeconomic status backgrounds, and our students who identify as Black, Latino, or Native. So for the next couple of slides, we're actually going to focus a little bit more in on the academic side and our curriculum here at Mudd, because this is what we get the most questions about. What is it going to look like to actually study and have time in the classroom here at Mudd? So this map actually tells you a little bit on what the next 4 years could potentially look like for you as a potential Mudder. So you'll notice that there are 3 major components: your core curriculum, your major, and your HSA and electives. Your core curriculum, the best way to think about this is it's your graduation requirements here at Harvey Mudd. There are plenty of different ways that institutions will call this, but at Mudd, it's called our core curriculum. So the core, you'll notice, takes up your entire first year. This is non-negotiable for students. Everyone does the core curriculum together. They have that opportunity to go through and really kind of take one class in every department we have to offer. And I'll show you in just a second what that means. But it allows our students to really get a hands-on approach and also get a baseline understanding of every single one of these fields. So with that being said, that is a big portion of how we're able to guarantee that our students are able to go ahead and choose any major once they get here to Mudd. So we don't have any impacted majors here at Mudd. The core curriculum really sets every single student up for success. So even though you might be thinking, I want to be potentially maybe engineering or physics, or you can come to Mudd and who knows, maybe you fall in love with chemistry because you took a really cool core chemistry class. So it's a big portion of it. We want our students to make sure that they have a full understanding of every single one of the disciplines before committing to a major, because you actually can't declare your major at all your first year. You don't have access to the major declaration forms. It's not until your second year that you actually have access to them. And at that point, it is up to you. You just need to turn them in by the end of your second year. So you have about 2 full years to decide what that looks like for you. But the core curriculum allows and guarantees every student at least exposure to all of our different departments. Now, with that being said, I keep talking about majoring. So obviously a major major is required in order to graduate from Harvey Mudd as well. What is that going to look like? Well, that's going to be up to you. With our majors, the most common ones that you'll see around campus are a single major or a combined major. Double majoring is very rare at Harvey Mudd, and especially for our engineers, it's actually not something that you can complete in time. If you wanted to, you would probably end up needing to do a lot of summer courses as well as potentially stay post your 4 years. So for that reason, we tell students that it is just not possible on Mudd's campus. Engineering is one of those majors that just has so many requirements, and I'll show you in just a few slides on what that looks like as well. But the last portion of what you need to do in your 4 years is the HSA. So HSA is an acronym you'll hear me talk about throughout the presentation. It stands for Humanities, Social Sciences, and the Arts. About a third of your time at Mudd is actually spent in the humanities, the social sciences, and the arts. We have an entire department dedicated to it here at Mudd. So that means that you have the opportunity to take classes on Mudd's campus, but also potentially any of the other Claremont colleges in different areas of study. Every student at Mudd completes the core curriculum, a major, and an HSA concentration. So an HSA concentration, the best way to kind of think about this is it is a concentration of classes in one particular humanities, social science, or art area. Sometimes folks like to think about it like a mini minor, but at Mudd, it's called a concentration. So it's something to keep in mind as you're going through this. Every student does that. So whether that's a combination of, for example, I've seen computer science and government, I've seen chemistry and environmental studies. It's kind of up to you to decide what those major and HSA concentrations look like, but just noting that this is a big portion of it. So I talked a lot about our core curriculum. What does that actually look like? You can see here are your first year and your second year. So that gray section on the previous slide is now broken up into yellow and blue. And you can see what I was talking about in one class in every department we have to offer. So you have chemistry, you have bio, you have math, you have engineering, computer science, physics. You also have some humanities, social science, and arts classes. So this HSA courses are also sprinkled within there. Every single class that you're seeing on your screen right now is required of every single student at Harvey Mudd, and it allows our students, again, to explore these different disciplines. It also allows every student, no matter what educational foundation or background they're coming to or Harvey Mudd with, the opportunity to choose any major once they get here. So if you're coming from a background where you're thinking, I did not enjoy that physics class, I didn't like my physics teacher in high school, that's fine. You might come to Mudd and really love special relativity and change your mind because you have a different teacher here. So again, this is just a portion of it. The other big thing that you'll notice on here is the blue section. So pass, no credit, and impact. Those are a couple of different important things to note. So your first semester at Mudd is actually pass, no credit. So nobody gets grades your first semester. This is a big way that we're actually kind of able to create community while you're on campus. A lot of our students will come to Mudd having competed in high school for grades or for rankings or for a GPA, test scores, AB scores, whatever it might be. We really want to try and get rid of that mentality where you're here at Mudd because we are a very collaborative space. We're not competitive. And so for that reason, that's what Pass No Credit really kind of starts off on. You are here to learn the fundamentals to these different areas before you jump into any of your majors, not to compete with the person next to you. The person next to you might have a completely different educational background than you, might have had a completely different life experience. We'd rather you learn from one another and learn how to work together than compete and see them as a competitor throughout your 4 years, especially with things like our clinic program. If you're competing with the person next to you, you're never going to complete any of the objectives or anything that's actually needed for those different programs. So that is a big portion of what we do our first semester. It's really kind of breaking down that mentality and allowing our students to see each other as not a competitor, but rather a collaborator. So that's a big portion of it. The other one is the impact course. So at the end of your sophomore, or I guess the second semester, I should say, of your sophomore year, you actually take an impact course. And this is the largest course that I was mentioning earlier that you'll ever take here on Mudd's campus. It is essentially the entire sophomore class coming together for one course where you do a lecture once a week and then you're breaking out into smaller breakout groups. It is typically taught by 7 different faculty members here at Mudd, and it changes a little bit over the years. So the past few years, it's been focusing on the California wildfires that have happened here, and just kind of looking at it from 7 different different disciplines. So for example, you actually had the head of our math department who was talking about, mathematical modeling with wildfires, and you actually had an atmospheric chemist, I should say, who was talking about what this looks like as the smoke continues to trail off into different directions for different states and communities. And then you also, of course, had a computer scientist who was in there. You had a member of our Hickson Center as well. And you also actually had a religious studies professor that was in there that was talking about the ways that different religions view, fire, view this entire like empathy. It's a very, very interesting approach. We do have a recording online as well if you're interested in learning a little bit more about what it's called Core 99. That is our impact course. So I would highly recommend checking that out and learning from the professors themselves. You can see pretty much about the first 10 minutes of class that they recorded for folks to see. So with that being said, this is your core curriculum. This is what is required of every single student at Mudd. The biggest thing to note is that you can see where our curriculum picks up. And so we actually have something called an enrollment requirement. It's not an application requirement. It just means that by the time you enroll in your fall semester at Harvey Mudd, you need to have completed at least 1 year of high school equivalent calculus, chemistry, and physics. So all 3 of those need to be completed. If you are unable to complete those for any reasons, like let's say your physics teacher quits in your senior year, or your high school doesn't offer calculus, just know that you are still eligible for admission to the institution. It's called conditional admission, but we will need you to complete that before you start in the fall semester. So that might be through a dual enrollment program, that might be through an online program. You would essentially work with the Office of Admission to find a suitable program that would work to meet this requirement. So that is just something to note on there. Again, enrollment requirement, not application requirements. If you're completing it, let's say you're taking calculus your senior year while you're finishing your application to Harvey Mudd, that is totally fine. You will be finished with calculus by the time you graduate. So that's pretty much the way that functions. Okay, so as far as the second component of your 4 years at Mudd, a major is a big portion of what you're going to do. So you declare your major by the end of your sophomore year. You saw that 4-year roadmap, and I talked about that a little bit earlier. But everything that you're seeing on here is our full list of majors at Harvey Mudd as of this year. So you'll notice that we do have quite a few new majors. Those are all focused in the climate areas, and they're called combined majors. So anything with an "and" on this list counts as a combined major. They're areas that our professors have found our students continuously trying to do double majors and have made it just slightly easier for our students. So bio and climate, chemistry and climate, computer science and climate, and math and climate are all those new areas. But those combined majors also include things like CS and math, CS and physics, math and computational bio, and then math and physics. So again, now the other big thing to note is that some of these different majors actually have essentially kind of like specializations or different tracks within them. So a good example is actually physics. Within physics, there are about 11 different areas or 11 different tracks that you can go down. Those include things like astrophysics or biophysics. So just note that your best bet, if you're looking for something specific, is to look on the website and get a better understanding of how these different majors work on Mudd's campus, because they all deviate slightly based on the different subsections between the major. Now, the one that is very different is engineering, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second, but it is actually a general degree of engineering. So something to note on that part. Now, as far as the HSAs on Mudd's campus, you saw within that 4-year map that it essentially takes up about a third of your time on campus. And this is the way that it's broken down. So you have 10 courses outside of the core curriculum that you actually need to do. So 5 of those are what we call breadth, which is 5 different areas of study. So everything that you're seeing here are areas of study that are offered at the 5 Claremont colleges. Just know this is as comprehensive as we could possibly get on one slide. And anything with an asterisk means that we actually have faculty within our own humanities, social science, or arts department that teach within these areas. So you could come to Harvey Mudd and say, hey, I really want to take a dance class and I want to figure out what's so cool about economics, and I want to take environmental analysis, and I want to do gender studies, and I want to do linguistics, whatever those might be, those end up being your 5 breadth classes. And then let's say you really, really fall in love with environmental analysis. That would be 3 additional courses to complete your 4 concentration courses. So here I'm kind of showing it with the mouse, but that is the biggest thing to know. You have to take 4 classes in one of those areas that you study to do a concentration. And so again, every student at Mudd graduates with the core curriculum, a major, and an HSA concentration. So 10 courses outside of the core, up to you to decide what that looks like. Again, there are about 2,500 courses to choose from across the consortium. This is just a very condensed and as comprehensively condensed list that we can go ahead and show you some of the areas of study. So now moving on, I wanted to give you just an idea of what some of our majors look like, and engineering is a good example. Engineering is broken down into 3 different areas. So you have design, systems, and science courses that you have the opportunity to study within. So everything that you're seeing on here is actually required, and this gives you kind of an idea. So within the design umbrella, you'll see you have an the students lovingly just call it E4 here on campus, but it's Introduction to Engineering, Design, and Manufacturing. But you also see junior clinic and senior clinic in there. So for certain majors, you're required to do this thing called clinic, which I'll explain in just a second. But engineers are very special in the sense that they have to do it twice. So they have to do it in their junior year and they have to do it in their senior year. For most other majors, you are only required to do it once. And so I'll dive a little bit deeper in that in a second. But then you also have systems and you have science courses. So this kind of, these 2 umbrellas really start to dive into that general degree of engineering, as well as also just the liberal arts approach within engineering. So when folks ask, well, where is mechanical engineering or electrical engineering or all these different types of engineering, just know that you're getting kind of a general approach to engineering before you choose maybe an upper division elective or a couple of upper division electives to really give you that experience within the specific type of engineering that you're looking to pursue. So on the science side, you get kind of an exposure to a little bit of chemical, a little bit of electrical, a little bit of mechanical before you start to dive deeper into and with your upper division electives, I should say. So you'll see students around campus. Yes, they call themselves electrical engineers. Yes, they call themselves mechanical engineers. Yes, they call themselves, aerospace, whatever it might be, all the different areas. But technically, everyone graduates with a general degree of engineering at Mudd. They just do those specializations and the nomenclature, I should say, through things like clinic and upper division courses. So I keep talking about clinic. What is it? So the clinic program is what we are known for here at Harvey Mudd. If you are unfamiliar with it, I would highly recommend checking out our website and just getting some exposure to a little bit more of this. So to give you an idea, the clinic program, again, it's required for engineers. It's also required for computer scientists and computer science math students. You'll oftentimes see students in computer science physics, also in here as a part of the clinic program, but for most other students, it's optional. You get to decide whether or not you want to do a thesis or you would like to opt into it. So sometimes we'll see students from the other programs in here. So with that being said, every single year, it's about 50 to 55 different projects and many different companies that pretty much vie for the opportunity to work with Mudd students. So these are some examples of some of the different companies that have worked with us in the past few years. But essentially, these companies come to Mudd and they pitch like either a problem or something that they would like to create to our clinic team. And then our professors allow our students to rank their top few choices and they help match the students into the correct programs. The one thing to know is that you're never going to have a student or a team of nothing but one type of major. So you're never going to see all engineers in one clinic, all computer scientists, because it's just not the way that real life problems work. Real life problems require a lot of interaction amongst disciplines. They require different skill sets. And so you're never going to find all of the mechanical engineers with the Toyota group or all of the biomedical engineers with the City of Hope group. You're instead going to find a combination and a mix of students amongst there. So again, it really just kind of goes along with what I was talking about earlier with the collaboration and not competition. And this is why. So with that being said, every single group does something different. And we have this really big thing called Projects Day. And if you are unfamiliar with it, again, there are recordings. You can see some of the really cool things that our students have done over the few years. The photo that you're actually seeing is the City of Hope Hope group from a couple of years ago. If you happen to be a Southern California resident, you might recognize the City of Hope. It is a local cancer research facility and hospital here in Southern California. And this is actually a group that was helping improve laparoscopic surgery for cancer patients here in Southern California. So we actually had about 3 students in that photo, 2 Mudd professors and a surgeon from the City of Hope. So that's basically just kind of showing you some of the different ways that our students, do what are known as site visits and work very closely with the different liaisons from the companies to meet what these companies need. Because oftentimes they're either creating something from scratch or fixing a problem that already exists. It gives our students a hands-on approach to the industry. It also gives them exposure to see, is this exactly the type of industry that I am interested in, or was I envisioning the industry looking slightly different? So this is a big portion of it. The clinic program is our flagship program. If you've heard of it at other institutions, it originated here at Mudd, and it's actually been recreated on quite a few different campuses. So this is just to give you an idea. We worked on, so many different things here on Mudd's campus. I like to talk about a couple of different ones. I tend to really kind of go towards a lot of the biomedical ones. So Medtronic was actually a company, they've since changed names now at this point, but they were actually working on an automated ECMO machine. So that is one that one of our students that worked here in the office was actually able to create. Her name was on the patent, and that was actually produced and now used in hospitals as well, which is really cool. We helped during the pandemic with the LA Regional Food Bank and actually kind of being able to take like data visualization of some of the different resources that were available during the pandemic here to the Southern California region. We also have Nordstrom, which was a really cool one. So during the pandemic, as different companies were trying to figure out how do we allow folks to try things on, we were able to create a visual try-on room for Nordstrom. So it was able to overlay clothes to the person's body and body type. So it was a big one that we were able to do during the pandemic. But every single company looks for something different. We work with pretty much all the national labs, so many different ones that, trust me, there are names that you will definitely recognize on this list. This is just a very small sampling, but knowing that every student has a company liaison that comes to Harvey Mudd, and they all do site visits. So those site visits, whether it is down the street or quite literally across the globe, we have groups that travel to other countries to work with different companies. This is just a big portion of clinic and making sure that we're able to fully understand what they're looking for. We've had companies, there's a really fun one where they were helping create like a gummy packaging one. There's also a video that you can see online and just learn a little bit more about it. But just note that every single clinic has a unique approach and a unique problem that they're trying to solve. So I would highly recommend looking at the clinic website. It's got about 30 years worth of data on there for you to explore, and you can see what some of these look like. Now, for those who are thinking, well, I am not an engineer, I'm not a computer scientist, so what am I going to be doing? There's probably that there is a high probability you will be doing a senior thesis, which is your own original work. You will be working with a faculty member to really kind of look at, what do you want to do? What do you want? What are you interested in studying? What is this going to look like for you? And you can see some of our past examples in math, bio, physics, chem. Those typically tend to be the disciplines of students who are interested in doing their own senior thesis. Sometimes students will get started on some of this research in an earlier time. So we'll have students who obviously want to do research. We typically recommend students not to research their first year. Not everyone listens to us, but you notice the core curriculum on its own, it's quite intensive. And so for that reason, we usually recommend students start after their first year. Each summer, we typically see about 200 to 250 of our students will stay behind to do summer research during their time here at Mudd. So it's kind of up to you. So out of our 921 students, it's going to be up to you to decide when research makes the most sense. The biggest thing that we oftentimes hear is that, or oftentimes get asked is, do I have to be in that specific discipline to do research or that specific major? And the answer is no. You see a lot of cross-discipline research throughout your time here at Mudd. So you could be a physics student actually studying in a chemistry lab, or you could be a math student working in one of the engineering labs, whatever it might be. It's truly up to you to work with your faculty faculty, to work with your advisor, and to decide what research makes the most sense to you. 100% of students do research throughout their time at Mudd, and as I was mentioning, some of this research can be carried on to do a senior thesis. We've seen plenty of times where a senior thesis was essentially an ongoing question that was then actually continued on by the professor after the student graduated, but it's up to you. I like to talk about a couple of different ones. My favorite one, within most recent, there was definitely a really fun physics one that, to be honest, totally went past my head. In terms of the complexity, we were looking at it from many years ago, but there's a really fun one for biology. I tend to lean towards the biological sciences, and so there was a student a couple of years ago who was essentially looking at an invasive ant species that has been found in not in California, in Florida, my apologies. And they're essentially looking at how this invasive ant species, the interactions that it has with the native ants, because it's actually invasive into the mangrove area of southern Florida. And if you are familiar with what mangroves do, they're pretty much the first line of defense against hurricanes, which Florida is very prone to. And so for that reason, it's very interesting to look at the essentially insect behavior with them when they run into a native ant species that's already in the area. And their instinct is actually to initially fling them straight into the ocean, which is not great for the mangroves. And so for that reason, we're looking at this and really kind of trying to figure out what we can do to help on honestly what feels like such a small scale, but when you have hundreds and millions of ants, hundreds of thousands of millions, I should say, this can become a larger problem for the mangrove population in southern Florida. So the student who was doing research across the country while here at Mudd, she built out an entire essentially kind of mangrove area, and she was able to go collect ants from the mangroves through Mudd. So this is a big portion of it. The other big thing about research to know is that our students, because we're an undergraduate only institution, you are having this hands-on approach. We don't have any of kind of the training materials, or I should say, like teaching instruction. I guess like the best way to put it is like teaching technology here on campus. Instead, you're actually using the physical instrumentation that our professors are using for their own research. So what that means is that no, you are not going to be, getting your numbers or your research is going to be slightly off because the instrumentation is for teaching and not the actual instrumentation. It is the actual instrumentation. And so our students are oftentimes able to get more accurate results. They're also able to turn around and take their results to conferences. So our students, we will oftentimes send them to represent Harvey Mudd at conferences, and we are notorious for taking home awards at poster sessions. Even though we are an undergraduate only institution, you'll see students who are rising sophomores, rising juniors, actually medaling in these different competitions or medaling at different research presentations against students who are in their masters and PhDs. So that is just something that Mudd is known for. Our students do a level of research that folks don't typically understand. We're designated as a research institution, and they just don't quite understand how an undergraduate institution is able to pull this off. And a big part of it is because of our size and because our professors are able to have such a one-on-one interaction when it comes to research. So with that being said, you've heard a lot about the academics. So what makes Mudders successful? What makes all of this worth it? Well, obviously, this is just a little bit of context on how Mudd does in the job market, especially nowadays. You can see what our employers are actually saying on the left-hand side. They're saying that our students are strong communicators, they're skilled collaborators, and essentially that our core curriculum works because they're understanding how to solve problems across interdisciplinary lines. Our students are oftentimes also referred to as the translators in their industry, meaning that they're able to understand, if they're an environment or, an engineer, they're able to understand, the coding from the computer science side. If they're a physicist, they are actually able to understand what the chemist is talking about. That is just a big portion of how our core really sets our students up for success. If you are looking to go into any form of grad school, you can see for yourself that Mudd has really good outcomes on that end as well. A lot of our students do end up going into graduate school in the long term. So there's a kind of the breakdown that you can see there. The percentage that go directly into PhD programs is quite high on that portion. So you'll notice just kind of the way this functions. So with that being said, while you are not on campus right now, we do want to talk a little bit more about Mudd's community values and really kind of what makes us so specific as an institution. So a couple of different things. One is that while folks oftentimes are contemplating a STEM degree, they really tend to think that they cannot study abroad, and that is not the case. Mudd does offer study abroad programs. It's typically in your junior year because your first and second year you are completing those graduation requirements. So your junior year, you have that opportunity to study abroad. We have programs pretty much on every continent with the exception to Antarctica. And you also have the opportunity to potentially look at the programs at any of the other Claremont colleges. So you would work with our specific study abroad director and figure out which program works best for you. We've seen plenty of students come through our office that are, a senior intern or a tour guide that have had the opportunity to study abroad, and they all praise and really talk about how much of a world view they were able to get through this and really kind of help them in the job market later. So that's a big portion of it. The other big thing to know about Mudd is that we run on an honor code. So if you are unfamiliar with what an honor code is, the honor code is essentially a phrase here on campus that allows us a level to give our students a level of freedom that you don't typically see in college students. So to give you an idea, every student signs the honor book when they come to campus, enroll in the fall semester, if you will. And so as they do that, our students are given things like key card access 24/7 to the academic side of campus. So they can come, and if they would like to, they can host a birthday party in any of the study rooms. They can go into the makerspace. They can do whatever they need because we trust them and train them to utilize all these different spaces. On the weekends, they pretty much run our office of admission on their own exclusively. We trust our students to a level of degree that you just don't typically see of college students. So it's a big portion of it. It allows certain things like, for example, take-home exams. Some professors will allow our students to actually be able to take those exams home and continue them if they're going home for maybe like a fall break or a spring break or whatever it might be. So a couple of things you'll see there. N+1 is also a big thing on our campus, which really kind of, again, just goes with that collaborative spirit that you see continuously fostered from the very beginning our students get to campus. And that's really the idea that there's always room for one more here on campus, one more in your study group, one more at your dining hall table, whatever it might be. Our students are very inclusive and very accommodating. So it's something that you'll see if you ever get a chance to really come to campus. And then as far as the larger community, a couple of things to note. There are 3 places to eat on campus, and one of them is by far the best, or one of the best amongst the 5 Cs. So you'll see our Hawk Shanahan Dining Hall, which is essentially our main dining hall here on campus. You also have our Jay's Place, which is underground pizzeria here on campus, and then we also have the H&C Cafe. So those are the 3 locations to eat on Mudd's campus, but there are about 18 places to eat across the entire Claremont College consortium. 3 of those are the ones on Mudd's campus. Mudd is nationally ranked the 7th best dining hall in the nation, so you actually have amazing food here on campus. We do have an entire committee dedicated to making sure that our student voices are heard within the way that we function with our dining hall staff. So it's a big portion of it. We also have a lot of really cool, fun traditions when it comes to the dining hall. For example, if you're familiar with Iron Chef, we do have something called Copper Chef on our campus, which is essentially a competition amongst the different dorms to decide which one is the best. And they do obviously a secret ingredient. They cook, and different staff members and faculty members are the ones who judge it. I actually had the ability and the opportunity to be a judge. This was last semester at this point, which was a really fun thing. So if you ever get a chance, I would highly recommend asking about traditions at Mudd. There are a ton of different ones. Copper Chef is definitely one of the big ones. Now, if you're looking to live on campus, you would be amongst the majority because about 98% of students live on campus all 4 years here at Mudd. So we have 9 different residence halls here. We basically kind of separate them by inner and outer dorms. So inner dorms being south, east, west, north. Yes, I was like trying to go by the compass. And then you have outer dorms, things like Drinkward, Lynn, Case, Garrett House, all the different ones. So with that being said, again, the majority of students live on campus all 4 years. Only about 2% of students will choose to live off campus. We're a very tight-knit and close community, so we're a very residential community. We already talked about study abroad, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about clubs and organizations, and noting that there are clubs and organizations on each of the different Claremont College's campuses. And we do share quite a few. So it ends up being actually we're about 300 clubs that we share just amongst the 5Cs, but there are about 100 that are just specific to Mudd. So that's something to note on that part. If you're ever looking for something specific and it's not on that home institution, it might be at one of the other Claremonts. We do share a lot of things, like for example, like debate team. We do share, for example, some certain things like orchestra. Those are all shared amongst the different Claremont colleges. So just note that your best bet is sometimes looking up Claremont College this, and that might tell you if it's a 5C shared thing instead of just a Mudd thing. Now, as far as athletics, if you're looking to play athletics here at Mudd, we do have about 21 different NCAA Division III sports teams. We compete in what's known as the SCIAC Conference, and we are actually part of what's known as CMS. So CMS stands for Claremont McKenna, Harvey Mudd, and Scripps. So we are the M in that acronym, and again, we're NCAA Division III, and so we are part of club and intramural. Some of those actually overlap amongst the 5Cs, but our rivals technically are Pomona and Pitzer. So it gets a little confusing when you have 5 schools with 3 of them banded together versus the other 2, but it's just the way that it functions. And as far as the consortium, obviously this is really kind of one of the big benefits of Mudd, of all 5 schools, is that you go to one, you get to attend all 5. You get the opportunity to study at any of the different schools and really navigate different areas. Now, wrapping things up, we get the opportunity to really kind of talk about the admissions process and what this looks like. So if you are looking to apply to Harvey Mudd, you'll note that we do have, or we're exclusively found on the Common App, I should say. So that's the only place you'll be able to go ahead and submit an application to Harvey Mudd. And when you add us as a member institution, you'll notice that we do have 2 supplemental essay questions. Those supplemental essay questions and their prompts, if you would like to know them ahead of time, can be found on our website. But as of 2026, we are changing those prompts. So if you're looking at those a little bit ahead of time, just keep that in mind. And as far as recommendations, we do have a requirement that we ask for one from a STEM teacher and the other from an HSA teacher. So HSA, again, standing for Humanities, Social Sciences, and Arts. And so you do need 2 letters of recommendation for your application to be complete. No, they cannot both come from a STEM teacher. They need to come from those different disciplines. Again, it's just a part of being a liberal arts college. We're looking to see, do you have that background in these different areas? And also, are you interested in doing about a third of your coursework outside of STEM? Because as you saw, that 4-year map projection, that is a big portion of what you will do at Mudd. Now, with that being said, we talked about the enrollment requirement already. The biggest thing to note about it is that there is no requirement that it has to be AP or IB or dual enrollment or a certain level of calculus, chemistry, or physics. It's whatever is available to you within your context and your background. This is a big portion of holistic admissions and understanding you, your background, and your educational progression as a person and as a whole. So that's really what we're looking for. If you are applying to Harvey Mudd for fall or admission to the fall 2027 semester, which means basically you are a rising senior in fall of 2026, then you are applying and will have the opportunity to still apply as ACT and SAT test optional. If you're a rising junior or rising senior and you start college in fall 28, fall 29, or any other further time, that is a larger conversation that the institution is currently looking at. Pretty much the end of our essentially kind of trial era of the ACT and SAT from COVID is coming to an end, and so Harvey Mudd is currently having that conversation. If there are any announcements, they would come typically in about October of 2026. So if you are viewing this recording after October 2026, I recommend you look at our website to see if there were any announcements. If there wasn't, then that's just kind of know that there will be any of the further information on our website. As far as application cycles, you should know that we do offer early decision 1, early decision 2, and regular decision. If you're applying for transfer, there's only one deadline for transfer students, but early decision is a binding agreement. So both early decision 1 and early decision 2 are for students who know that Harvey Mudd is their #1 choice. This is where they would like to go ahead and attend, and they'll have that opportunity. Regular decision is for folks who are applying to multiple other institutions but would like to hear back from those institutions before they make their choice. So just keeping that portion in mind. And then this is just to give you kind of a little bit of insight into how we review applications at Harvey Mudd. You heard me mention holistic admissions earlier. So for Harvey Mudd, we basically take everything you turn in or is turned in on your behalf into consideration. And that's everything you're seeing on the right. So everything that's considered your application is pretty much at the core of what we are looking at. Everything on the left are some of the different areas that we start to have conversations about. So we actually practice CBE, where we read in pairs and have the opportunity to really have a conversation about the different students that are applying to Harvey Mudd. And so we have larger conversations about how our students engage with their community, what type of intellectual curiosity they have, exhibit, or potentially are bringing to campus. Of course, what types of contributions we can see them making to our Mudd community, and overall, are you a Mudd fit? So those are some of the different conversations that we have. Just note that, while you have a territory manager is the person that's going to know your high school the best, there's typically a second reader that is reading your application with no context and learning about you very much just from that application. So it looks very different for those two readers, but it allows us to really kind of come in and have two different views on an application and have a larger conversation. Okay, and then wrapping things up with financial aid, there are a couple of things you need to know about financial aid at Harvey Mudd. We offer need-based and merit-based aid. If you're looking to apply for need-based aid, just know that we meet 100% of demonstrated need for all students. That means for U.S. citizens, for permanent residents, and international students as well. So if you apply for need-based aid and are admitted to Harvey Mudd, we are committed to meeting that 100% of demonstrated need. Now, how do you apply for financial aid? That's going to be through the FAFSA and the CSS profile. Both of those are required. If you're unfamiliar, the FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It is a federal application that you would turn in, and that is federal funding, so from the U.S. government. The CSS profile is a College Board-based application that you would then turn in that has a little bit more and goes a little bit more in depth into institutional methodology. So it's basically a little bit more context, so that way we're able to make sure that we're meeting 100% completely for you and your family specific instance. Now, with that being said, we are need blind for some of our application or some of our applicants. So if you are a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, then we are need blind in that process, which means myself as an admission counselor would have no idea how much you need on the financial aid side, or if what that's going to look like. We basically vote on our admissions decisions and then turn around and ask our Office of Financial Aid to put together your admission package. If you're an international student, it's a little bit different. We are need aware in that process, so that is just due to funding limitations here on Mudd's campus. So just kind of noting that there is a difference between U.S. citizens and permanent residents and international students for our need blind and need aware policies. Now, if your family happens to make their household income is below $100,000 with typical assets for their area, then we actually have a no loans policy. So this means that if you are looking at this and your family makes below that income, you can go ahead and fill out the net price calculator and get an estimate on what that would look like for your family and potentially have no loans at the end of your time at Mudd. So just a couple of things to note there. Now, the difference between need-based and merit-based aid is that merit-based aid is a very different conversation. For the majority of folks, when you turn in your Common App, you're automatically considered for multiple different merit scholarships here at Mudd. If you are looking to apply for additional merit scholarships, the three that do require an additional application are the three on your screen. So it's going to be the President Scholars, that's going to be FIRST Robotics, and VEX Robotics. You do need to be a part of either FIRST or VEX Robotics to apply for those specific programs, and you can learn a little bit more about the specific scholarship application requirements on our financial aid website. So just kind of note that portion. The President Scholars is very different. It's typically students who are looking to make an impact in STEM, because you are actually mentored by our president here at Harvey Mudd. And when you go through that process, you would actually be awarded a full tuition scholarship for all 4 years of your time here at Harvey Mudd. So full tuition all 4 years, and you would actually be entrusted with potentially helping host things like conferences here on Mudd's campus and or representing us with President Nemhard on a larger international scale at the UN for the UN Sustainable Development Goals Summits. She's very involved in that, and just Mudd in general, as you saw with the direction of some of our different majors with the climate component. Mudd is very much involved on a world stage of making sure that we're able to help with the sustainable goals set by the United Nations. So if you're interested in representing Mudd on a larger international scale, that's the President's Scholars. Every year a cohort is awarded it, and if you are actually chosen as a finalist, we would fly you to campus to go through an interview process here on our campus before awarding any of those different awards. So just kind of note that's merit scholarships. For the ones that you're automatically considered for, those might be things like a Harvey S. Mudd Award. Those are typically about $10,000 each year for the 4 years, so typically about $40,000 at the end of your 4 years. But I would highly recommend reaching out to the Office of Financial Aid if you have questions about any of the context or any of the additional information about financial aid that I mentioned. I would highly recommend reaching out to their office. Okay, and that's pretty much the end of today's presentation. I do want to provide you with a couple of different QR codes, so you can go ahead and either screenshot this if you're watching it on your phone or scan this from your laptop. You can see the clinic archives, undergraduate research, and the net price calculator. So the clinic archives will show you a little bit more of some of the different companies I was talking about earlier. Undergraduate research will allow you to learn a little bit more about different research projects on our campus. And the net price calculator would allow you to learn what the cost of attendance might look like for you here at Harvey Mudd. And then for students, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about student life, while you're not able to attend a campus tour virtually, you are able to learn a little bit more and also connect with our current students. The QR code to our Discord, while it is a Office of Admission run Discord, you do get the opportunity to chat with students across different majors and across different disciplines. So just kind of note that we do host what's known as Discord office hours, so you can chat quite literally live with any of our students. That's typically either every week or every other week, depending on the time of the year. And lastly, of course, if you would like to take these slides home, you can go ahead, or if you have any follow-up questions, you can always reach out to the Office of Admission. If you need to contact us, our email is on the screen. But thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me virtually. Again, my name is Natalia Duran. I'm one of the Associate Directors here at HMC, and I've thoroughly enjoyed giving you your information session today. Have a good day.